This episode of the 46 of 46 podcast is sponsored by Crua Outdoors. Camp comfortably with the world's best insulated tents and outdoors gear. Check out their tents, sleeping bags, pads, and more at cruaoutdoors.com. That's CRUA outdoors.com. Crua Outdoors, the best night's sleep you'll have in the wild. It's 20 degrees out here, and day one of the Northville-Placid Trail is officially underway. We're coming up to the Aluska Lean-To, walking along the cold river, and it is raging today. We're here at the Noah John Rondo Hermitage, 2 miles out from Catlin Bay at Long Lake, climbing up towards the scenic viewpoint, and it is steep. We're walking between the Seward and Santanoni ranges right now. Well, it is a winter wonderland back here at Duck Hole. Crossing the suspension bridge over the Sacandaga River, it's a quiet, peaceful evening here at Spruce Lake number 3. Well, we woke up covered in 2 inches of snow here at the Kelly Point Lean-To. Passing the Cedar River flow, sunny day at Stevens Pond. We're building our campfire early here at Silver Lake to fight off the bugs. Wow. Dude, I have no idea how we're going to cross this swamp. Just walking down the road here in Piseco. Well, I guess it's time to take off the boots and cross the West Stony Creek. 1 mile to Lake Placid, 1 mile left to Northville. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast, the Northville-Placid Trail Edition. The Northville-Placid Trail, Day 7, Piseco to Silver Lake. May 22nd, 2020. Memorial Day weekend. This was the day I'd been working towards over the last month and a half, the final section of the 138-mile Northville-Placid Trail. I was back at the Route 8 road crossing in the town of Piseco where I finished my previous section, ready to go right back in the woods and continue south to Northville to complete the trail. The weather was warm and dry this week, so the conditions were going to be perfect. This last section would be a good-sized haul to the finish line, but that's what I was looking for, and since the weather was great, it was the right time to do it. I hiked this final section with some new faces, James Griffith and Sarah King, 2 friends that I met at the 46er banquet last year, and I've wanted to hike with for a while. Both James and Sarah are real trail hounds, and they often do monster ultra hikes, so I knew they'd be up to the backpacking task and ready to hammer out some serious miles with me here on the Northville-Placid Trail. I was able to get a ride today from Lake Placid to Piseco courtesy of Jonathan Zaharik, who I hiked the previous section of this trail with. Since James Griffith worked until 11 p.m. the night before, and since today would be the shorter day of the two, we didn't feel the need to start too early, so we planned to meet at the trailhead and start hiking at 8 a.m. Jonathan picked me up at 6 a.m., and we enjoyed a nice morning drive through the Adirondack Park as we made our way to Piseco. Once we arrived back at the trailhead, the exact place we finished our last hike only a week prior, we were met with some new friends. And no, not James and Sarah. We were met with the swarms and swarms of black flies. No. They had arrived for the season, and they were out for blood. And it was rough. So Jonathan and I decided to wait for my new hiking partners back inside his car, as the flies swarmed around my backpack sitting just outside the vehicle. And then a few minutes later, James and Sarah arrived and we said our hellos. Since it was Memorial Day weekend, James was dressed in full American flag apparel, so I appreciated that greatly. Then we all threw on our heavy backpacks and started walking towards the trail. Speaking of heavy backpacks, this section my pack only weighed 35 pounds. So from the first 3-day section with Josh it weighed 43 pounds, then the next overnight with Jonathan it was 38 pounds, and now for the final 2-day section, 35 pounds. So I have been able to dial in the weight and get it down slightly, especially on this section since I wasn't going to need all my winter layers this time. But of course, I still brought lots of food, per usual, and some layers. I also replaced my Nalgene bottles this time with 2 1-liter Polar Seltzer bottles to lessen the weight as well, since Nalgenes are much heavier than those bottles and hold the same amount of water. But we walked up to the trailhead and signed in to my final section of the trail at 8:15 a.m. So far on the 100 miles that I've hiked on this trail, I've yet to run into another hiker, but judging by the weather and this weekend, and the few recent sign-ins, I had a feeling that streak was going to come to an end. But the sun was out, the bugs were relentless, and it was time to hit the trail for my final section on the Northville-Placid Trail. Goodbye, Piseco. Destination, Northville. Our plan for this final section was a full 2-day hike from Piseco to Northville. 39 miles and 5,500 feet of gain over this section, which is half the elevation gain on the entire 138-mile Northville-Placid Trail. Today's goal was to hike the 15 miles to the Silver Lake Lean-To for the night and call it a shorter day to enjoy some camping. The following day would be the big 24-mile push to Northville, so while today was a short day, we still had some miles to crush as we walked south to Northville, over the Sacandaga River, past Mud Lake, and ultimately spend my final night on the NPT at the final lean-to of the trail, 15 miles to the Silver Lake Lean-To. It is 8:15 on Friday, May 22nd. I am back here at the Piseco Route 8 road crossing here at the trailhead to go back into the woods, continuing to hike southbound today on my final section of the Northville-Placid Trail. It'll be about 40 miles over the next 2 days down to Northville to the finish. So we're here at Route 8. We have 3.8 miles over to the Hamilton Lake Stream Lean-To, 6.4 miles to White House Road. The bugs are out, but I'm wearing shorts. It's going to be absolutely unbelievably beautiful weather. No clouds, highs in the mid-70s. It's going to be a very different experience than my first section. And I have 2 new hiking partners today, James and Sarah, who I met at the 46er banquet. Our plan for tonight is to go 15 miles to the Silver Lake Lean-To, and then tomorrow will be a long day, but it will be the last day, 24 miles to Northville. This section began through a beautiful, mostly hardwood forest with some spruce and pine trees in there for good measure. And as I was walking during this initial section, the woods had a very different look and vibe than I remembered. It all looked so green and vibrant, and I couldn't pinpoint what exactly looked different about it. And then it finally occurred to me. The leaves on the trees had officially bloomed. Thus far throughout my section hike of the NPT over the past month and a half, I've had the opportunity to watch the seasons fully change here on this trail. Just 5 weeks ago in mid-April, Josh and I were hiking and camping in full winter conditions. Then the snow finally melted recently and the woods were bare, allowing for great views in the distance between the trees just a week ago. And now the trees have fully bloomed with beautiful green leaves. I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to truly witness the changing of the seasons from winter to spring to basically summer here in these woods. It was a very cool thing to experience. The trail again is very well marked and well defined. In fact, with the leaves on the trees now, I'd say it's actually easier to follow than when there aren't any leaves. The blue trail markers are much easier to spot. And again, like most of the sections down here, they're scattered well. We hiked the first 1.3 miles in no time before coming to the first swamp, known on the map as Dead Vlaai. Vlaai is a Dutch word for swamp. So we're about 10-15 minutes in, crossing over a swampy area with some very fresh logs here, which is nice, but it's pretty nasty actually. But fortunately the wood bridges are pretty fresh, but they're not like your typical bridges you see. They're just kind of logs from the woods here thrown together, but they work. And crossing this without them would be treacherous. So I walk over this log here. And the bugs are just flying all over the place. But so far on the Northville-Placid Trail, I've had 0 bugs, which has been fortunate. This swamp in particular had almost a Hollywood movie quality to it. It was exactly what you'd picture seeing in a movie in a backwoods swamp scene. The swamps in the backwoods. Dark, musty. Who knows what's back there? Though there was no fog, but it had that look to it. The footbridge here was also slightly different than most. The logs that they used to build the bridge through the swamp, which is a godsend, by the way, because it would be a rough crossing without a bridge. They were just down trees from the area, still covered in bark, and they were secured together with nails and ties for crossing, so it was a real bridge. So the bridge had a different look to it, but it was still rock solid. Moments after the 3 of us crossed the Vlaai, I saw a couple of hikers coming up the trail in front of me. My first hikers on the whole NPT. My first hikers. How you guys doing? My first hikers I've passed on this whole trail are you two. Where are you guys coming from? Oh, so you just started yesterday?
We started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you guys headed?
I had a good run.
Northville.
Over 100 miles passing 0 hikers, and then I passed my first group 1.5 miles into my last section.
Did you stay at Silver
But I
Lake
was
last
actually
night?
quite excited to see them. When you're out hiking in the high peaks or other mountains in the Adirondacks, you tend to know where other hikers are headed, but out here, I wanted to talk to them and hear their story a little bit. Where they're hiking to today, what campsite or lean-to they stayed at last night, what one they're planning to stay at tonight. And I just passed my first hikers of the trail. So the trail conversations on the NPT, or any backpacking trail, lends itself to a different type of conversation than I'm used to. So I was stoked to talk to these two about their hike. So with that said, spoiler alert, we'd run into a bunch of hikers today. We kept walking through different woods, sometimes hardwoods, sometimes big open spruce forests, then back to hardwoods. In fact, I remember one section in particular where you'd cross over the river and then I turned around and the river was the complete line between a spruce forest and a hardwood forest. And then you'd keep walking through that spruce forest and a minute later, after crossing over another footbridge over a river, it would change completely back to a hardwood forest again. Like a line in the sand, and the forest just completely changed over and over again. It was actually pretty neat. Keeps it interesting while you're hiking. The trail has the usual amount of blowdown to deal with, though I'd say as the trail moves south, it gets nicer and nicer. Just before 9:30, about an hour and 10 minutes into our hike, we arrived at Priest's Vlaie, a huge grassy marshland on our left, about 3 miles in from Piseco. We've been hiking for a little over an hour. We are now at the Priest's Vlaie swampy area, which is actually really neat. Grassland, and it goes for forever. Way bigger than a football field. Pretty neat, actually. Really into it. Nice little gentle stream running through. Priest's Vlaie. This marshland had a beaver dam and a gentle little stream running through it, and it was enormous. The type of clearing, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, that you wouldn't be surprised to see a bear hanging out at. But no bears today. The three of us continued hiking, making great time, maintaining my 2 to 2.5 miles an hour pace as we tried outrunning the abundance of insects swarming our bodies. Since the temperatures were going to be in the mid to upper 70s today, a lot different from the 20-degree temperatures I hiked in on my last section, I was hiking in shorts and a t-shirt today. It was amazing. And it was so nice to be wearing shorts since only a few weeks earlier I was hiking in pants and a mid-layer with a winter hat and winter gloves and snow all around me. So I was feeling good in that regard, though the bugs were trying to make me pay for the 100 miles I hiked on this trail bug-free. Those little bastards. Just crossed over a little river stream right after the swampy area, and the bugs are getting vicious, sadly. But now the woods are big spruce and pine trees, and the sun is shining through the brush. Looks really nice. Birds are chirping. The trail's been pretty fast so far. Nothing really to slow you down. The plan for our morning was to hike to the Hamilton Lake Stream lean-to, where we'd stop for a quick swig and a snack. And the woods leading up to that point had some huge old spruce trees and young small hardwood trees. Beech and maple trees mostly. Which was actually kind of the opposite from the woods that ended my last hike heading to Piseco, where there were mostly huge old hardwood trees and small young spruce trees. So it flip-flopped. If you haven't noticed, I personally love taking mental notes of how the forest looks, and then when it changes as I walk through it. I enjoy those changes, and it helps me to take it all in and not zone out. This way I notice all of those intricacies in the woods around me. Just before 10 a.m. and 3.7 miles into our day, we hiked up the bank and arrived at the Hamilton Lake Stream lean-to. We just made it to the Hamilton Lake Stream lean-to, which looks like it's not too bad. It's very quiet up here. You're above the river stream, and it would definitely be a quiet place to camp. A lot of leaves everywhere, up on a bank, but there were a couple campers in there, so we're going to continue. This lean-to sits up on a